In today's video, we're taking a look at some off-season trade and free agent rumors for the Montreal Canadiens. We're going to take a look at some potential contracts for some of the guys that are coming due, as well as Pierre-Luc Dubois. What might a trade to Montreal look like? I come across a recent article talking about what is likely going to be offered by the Montreal Canadiens, so I want to get his opinion on that. Plus, we have lots of updates around NHL prospects, Shea, Wright, Devin Levi, Richter McGroarty, Hughes, and more. Lots of other playoff implications and updates from around the NHL. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to look at today. First up, some updates from the NHL playoffs. Of course, today's Friday. It's Good Friday. Long weekend for Easter. So if you celebrate that, certainly hope you have a great long weekend. Lots of playoff implicated games last night. Today, there's actually no scheduled NHL games, which is a rarity, especially late in the season. But lots tomorrow and a fair bit last night that were important. The Toronto Maple Leafs ended up clinching home ice advantage, so they ended up losing the game to the Boston Bruins in OT, but they still picked up a point, which was all they needed to secure home ice advantage. So right now, that's the one playoff matchup across the NHL that has already been confirmed that we know about, is the Leafs and the Lightning. We've known that for some time, but now it's official. And we also now know that the Toronto Maple Leafs will have home ice advantage. The Lightning, of course, played yesterday against the New York Islanders, lost the game, but more importantly, had a lot of injuries. They had several players leave the game due to being hurt, which was not good. I know Pavelski was one, but word was it wasn't too serious. But recently acquired at the deadline, Tanner Jeannot, he left and he looked to be in rough shape. It looked to be a similar type of scenario that we saw with Derek Brassard in the Ottawa Senators just a week ago, where he fell awkwardly and his leg bent underneath him really awkwardly. Can't say for sure it's the same injury, but it was the same sort of idea, and it looked like it could be very serious. I know John Cooper expressed a lot of concern over the player's health and what the injury was going to be. So they spent a lot on him. That was a big price tag to pry him out of Nashville, and if they have to go the playoffs without him, that's going to be a big blow. He's been an important piece for them so far, and there were other players injured as well. He was not the only one, but when you factor all that in, that's not a good break here late in the season. Of course, Steven Stamkos was playing in game number 1,000 as well, and unfortunately for the Lightning, it's not going to be a great, memorable evening because it was not a great game from a performance standpoint. It was a bad game from an injury standpoint, and overall, it's just a bad loss to the New York Islanders. We've seen the Seattle Kraken officially clinch their playoff spot in their second season, so that's great to see. Still, even though last year they didn't do overly great, didn't duplicate what Vegas did when they started in the NHL. Seattle is still well ahead of many expansion teams in NHL history in that regard. They've had a huge improvement year over year, and going to the playoffs in year two, which is quite an accomplishment. Of course, in the Eastern Conference wildcard race, we've seen most teams that were impacted still pick up the win. The Islanders won, the Penguins won, the Panthers won, and the Sabres won in Detroit in a late game that was going back and forth. I think it was a 6-5 shootout victory. And it was a crazy game there, but the Senators unfortunately lost to the Panthers. They got in a real situation where they were goalied with Alex Lyon making 56 saves for the Panthers. In my opinion, the Sens really had a solid game for how they played offensively. They just could not beat the goalie nearly often enough. They lost 7-2. They didn't get the saves on their end when they needed it the most. They obviously had both young goalies, starting Muriel and went to Sogard later, and they both had their struggles as well. So unfortunately for the Sens, they're officially out of the playoffs now. The Sabres are basically hanging on by a thread here, but they're technically still in it where they didn't lose. But really it's between the Isles, Pens, and Panthers. Really, I don't think that the Sabres are going to be fortunate enough to have two of those three teams fall out, as there's just too much of a gap there. The odds are certainly well against them, but like I said, mathematically, Buffalo is still in it, mainly because they played fewer games at this point. So we'll have to watch that race get a little closer. Should be interesting. Of course, we saw Mikko Rantanen last night pick up goal number 50, so it's a huge milestone for Rantanen in Colorado. Joe Pavelski is going to be closing in on the big milestone as well. Same with Claude Giroux. Pavelski only needs one more point to hit 1,000 for his career, so he should hopefully do that before the end of the season. And Claude Giroux, same predicament with the Senators, is only 3 away now from 1,000 points for his NHL career. It would be nice to see those two longtime veterans hit those milestones before this season ramps up. And Pavelski and Giroux, I believe they each have 3 or 4 games left. So the odds are certainly there for them to be able to accomplish it. And Erik Karlsson is still getting closer, but he needs 2 more points to hit 100 on the season. The Minnesota Wild are getting back Kirill Kaprizov. He will return to action tomorrow. Unfortunately, though, they did lose Eriksson Ek. Joel Eriksson Ek will be out for at least a week. They're saying he's week to week is what they're calling the lower body injury. So in all honesty, it's probably going to be more than 1 week. I would say it's going to be between 1 and 2 if that's if things go well. Don't know the full extent of the injury, of course, but that's a big blow for Minnesota. After last night's action as well, the Senators did return young goaltender Levi Muriel, who just came over from Finland. Ridley Gregg will go back down to help the Belleville Senators as they push to get them hopefully into the American Hockey League playoffs. So a variety of prospect updates. Devin Levi, of course, is technically an NHL goalie right now, but has only played a couple of games, so Line Mighty is still a prospect. But he has been confirmed to be the winner for the second straight year of the Mike Richter Award for top goalie in college hockey in the United States. So certainly quite an accomplishment. His college career at Northeastern was, legendary in many aspects of the numbers he put up. So it's absolutely phenomenal and certainly a well-deserved recognition there. Shane Wright, of course, one of the top prospects outside the NHL right now, and obviously was the projected top pick in last year's NHL draft. Ended up going number 4 to the Kraken. Is going to be heading back. Likely, we'll see what the Kraken confirm, but many expect him to go to the American Hockey League. His junior season is now wrapped up. Unfortunately, for Wright and the Windsor Spitfires, who he was traded to, their season is now over. The Spitfires picked him up in a big trade. The Spitfires were really, they gave up a lot, going all in here to pick up Shane Wright for a hopeful deep playoff run. And instead, they get swept in the first round by the Kitchener Rangers. So that's certainly not good for the Spitfires and head coach Mark Savard. And Shane Wright himself obviously didn't have a great series. So that's certainly not good. But hopefully there was some. I didn't obviously get to see the games, but I certainly hope for Wright's sake that good learning curve and good experience, but certainly not something he was hoping to add to his resume when he was sent back to junior. But it makes sense that he would likely go back to the American Hockey League at this point. The Kraken have had their solid, steady lineup at the NHL level. They're heading for the playoffs. It makes sense for Shane to go down there and get more playing time. Depending on how playoffs go, if they do run into any injuries, he could certainly be one of their first call-ups if need be, but expect him to likely head there. The Winnipeg Jets are likely going to be getting the news confirmed. I don't know if it's official yet, but I know Winnipeg media is saying that they're one of their top prospects here from the 2022 NHL draft, 14th overall pick, Rutger McGroarty, will be returning to the University of Michigan for a sophomore season next fall. So the Winnipeg Jets are going to have to wait another season to get him signed. He had a pretty solid year with Michigan this year. Point per game player, 39 points in 39 games played. And I think they're obviously anxious to get him to turn pro, but sounds like that's just going to have to wait. And hopefully he'll be that much more ready and prepared to make the jump. Hopefully when next season rolls around, he might be able to join them at the end of next season, depending on how things go in Michigan. And at this point, it's not confirmed as of yet, but reports indicate from Elliot Friedman and a few others that Luke Hughes will be turning pro, leaving the University of Michigan and signing with the New Jersey Devils. And apparently is on way, or if he may already be arrived, but he's supposed to be meeting up with the Devils. He's not expected to play this weekend, but we should get an announcement on his entry-level contract being signed, sealed, and delivered sometime here over Easter weekend is most likely what we're going to see. And then it's possible, I guess, that he does get to play in a game here before the end of the regular season. We'll see, but if not, could be with the team and, an option from the playoffs. So Luke Hughes would be yet another tool to add to a deep Devils team as they prepare for their first playoff action here in some time. It looks as though Cam Talbot is likely done with the Ottawa Senators. Back to that action here for a little bit here in the game last night with the Florida Panthers. Since Talbot returned with injury, and he's been out with injuries multiple times this season, but he recently returned, was back probably about a week and a half ago. And since he's been back after missing like 3 weeks, he hasn't been good. He's been really struggling. And to be honest, when you watch him play, It looks like, and I've seen numerous fans say this, and I do tend to agree with it based on what I've seen, it looks like he's checked out and knows he's likely not coming back or doesn't want to come back and just doesn't care. I mean, I hate to say that about a professional player. You should be a good pro and give it your best every night, but it's hard to imagine how a guy with the history he has could be as bad as he's been lately. But at the end of the day, this trade has not gone well for the Senators last night, and he became a healthy scratch. So when he's a healthy scratch, and it was Talbot and Muriel, and of course, in the game prior to that, Muriel, of course, had a big performance. They lost in overtime, but they gave him a chance to win, picked up a point, kept their playoffs hopes alive. And then, of course, I thought it could have been an option to go to Talbot or back to Muriel for last night against Florida. And Matt Sogard, who was sick previously, which is why they had Muriel up, was flown in. He had a long travel day just so he could back up Muriel and they could scratch Talbot. So that's a tall telling sign there that, listen, we don't really want you on the bench right now. Both goalies ended up in action because things did not go well. And to me, that's the writing on the wall for Talbot's time in Ottawa to be up. There was rumors earlier that he was looking for a $5 million contract extension, and there's just absolutely no way that he's earned that kind of money. There's no way the Senators are going to pay a 35-year-old struggling goaltender who's been injured often and inconsistent all year that kind of money. So negotiations have never been close. They've had a few talks, but nothing's ever been close to materializing. And based on how he's played and now the healthy scratch, I think that seals the deal that he won't be back. I think it's probably honestly best that the team consider not even starting him. I mean, at this point, they don't have any more back-to-backs. They're going to have Sogard and Talbot up. I would let Sogard run the table here unless something happens. I mean, the games are not meaningful anymore, but you still want to finish strong and put on a good show for your fans. And to be honest, having Talbot in the net just doesn't, it's not going to go over well, I don't think. So we'll see on that. Now, in Montreal, some rumors I want to take a look at. I found an article from La Presse and some bloggers talking about it as well. Talking about a couple of rumored contract extensions in place and what a Pierre-Luc Dubois trade could look like. For starters, though, in the Montreal goaltending increase, of course, we've talked a bit about this lately, how Caden Primo may or may not be traded. Is Jake Allen going to be traded? Is he going to stay on as the veteran, guy who's going to be the mentor for the, a younger goalie, whether it be Montembeault or Primo, to certainly, mentor them and be the veteran guy around. And a lot of people seem to think that Montembeault has done a fantastic job and has earned himself a nice contract extension. There's some that suggest that a 4-year deal valued at around $10 million, which would give him an AAV of $2.5 million, might be a good happy medium where the team and player could agree on. Obviously, that's one contract that fans that have been talked about here through La Presse that seem to be a popular opinion. Raphael Harvey-Pinard has been a revelation, I guess you could say. The guy's been scoring at a crazy rate. Maybe signing him for 3 years at $4.5 million. Yes, he scored at a crazy rate, but it's still a small sample size. So lots of, a fair bit of cap space to be tied up in the future beyond the current season for these two players. On Montembeault, you certainly don't have to rush into that. He still has a year left on this deal. But, the suggestion is that he could continue to put his price tag up and that the Habs should not wait to extend him. So if they do extend him, you got to think that a guy like Primo is going to be even more likely to be dealt, right? Because if they sign Montembeault to a 4-year deal and they already did a 2-year extension with Jake and give him a modified no trade, to me that doesn't give a lot of confidence that there's room for Primo in the system. So to me that does look more likely to trade if this comes to be. So I like to know what everybody's thoughts are on those potential contracts because they seem to be a popular trending topic against amongst Habs fans here on social media. And as far as the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade goes, there's suggestions now saying that the trading price to acquire the star from the Winnipeg Jets, the star, could very well be the first-round pick that they have from the Florida Panthers and some combination of 1 or 2 B-level prospects. Obviously, we know that the Jets are not going to have a ton of leverage. Obviously Dubois, he can sign for 1 year and walk as a UFA, then get nothing. We know that he has no trade protection, but other teams aren't going to trade for him knowing that he won't sign. It's just that simple. So at the end of the day, he's pushed his way. He's like figured out how to get the leverage here, and the Jets aren't going to have a huge say on this. So at the end of the day, the prospects that were suggested that could be considered, guys they could part with would be guys like Emil Heinemann. You're looking at Riley Kidney, Philip Messar, Joshua Waugh, maybe Jaden Struble, William Trudeau. Those are the names that were brought up in this article. And to be honest, I can see that they have more than enough defensive depth. I can see Struble or Trudeau, maybe. Some of these other forwards, though, are pretty good. I mean, I'd be careful for them trading Joshua Waugh. To be honest, I think he has a real solid potential. He's got good size. He's good in special teams. Has good scoring touch. Of course, he's French-Canadian, which we know is important to have players of that in that area, too. Riley Kidney might be one that interests the Jets. Hard to say. Philip Messar, of course, is real good buddies and countryman with Juraj Slafkovsky. They may not want to move him either. He was also a pretty high pick last year. So interesting to see. Do you think a first-round pick that belongs to the Florida Panthers that will be probably somewhere in that mid to lower part of the first round, along with a B-level prospect, is that going to be enough for them to pry PLD out of Winnipeg and get him to Montreal a year early? I mean, to me, like I said before, I don't think that the Montreal Canadiens are going to have to pay a huge price tag because they have all the leverage in this kind of trade. They may have no choice but to send something off the books to make the money work, so they may have to talk to Winnipeg about taking a contract, and if they do that, then that might actually lower the price tag a little bit too. So they'll have to see how things go from a cap perspective. If they can move out enough other money ahead of time without some other cost-cutting measures, then maybe that's not something they'll have to worry about. But either way, very interesting to know that these are the potential assets that might be used. I'd love to know what you guys think. If that's going to be enough, should they do the deal? What prospect would you both be willing to part with? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.